In this video I'll be showing you how I take a bare naked model like this and add texture, paint and weather to produce something like that, using nothing more than artist acrylic paint, a little bit of modeller's paint and a tiny touch of weathering powder. Hello ladies and gents, and welcome back to a slightly different video than I usually would do. I know I say I don't do tutorials, and this isn't really a tutorial. This is more of how I do a particular topic or a particular subject. And in this situation, I'm taking these three TARDIS models that I've been working on, and I want to texture, paint and then weather them. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on how I do that. Now, I've got the three models, they're at that stage ready to be textured and painted. We're going to look at how I'm going to apply the texture. We may brush across, to use a pun, how I paint it. It's probably going to be an airbrush, I don't know yet. And then how I'm going to weather it. I'm going to be using, for this particular process, some bog standard artist's acrylic paint. Tamiya blue, that's going to be our base colour, which I'll then add other colours to give my tonal texture, and then again back to our artist acrylics for the actual weathering. On top of that, I may also go with weathering powders. Now, I haven't used them in years, so we'll see how that one goes. Now, when it comes to the actual texturing, I'm going to be using a blue, purely because I want to, but to be honest, you could use bright pink, green, any colour. It doesn't matter what colour you use paint wise for the texture, because you're going to paint over it anyway. So I just happen to be using blue because I happened to see it in the shop and I liked it and I thought, right, I'll add that. So please don't write to me like you did last time and say what precise colour blue did you use, because to be honest, the acrylic paint that you use to do the texturing doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. I'm just using blue for the sake of it. I'll also be using sponges maybe to do a bit of texturing as well on top of that, and I'm just using standard brushes. The more knackered they are the better, but for putting the acrylic blue on for the texturing, it's just going to be a standard stippling brush, a hog hair brush. For the weathering, it's going to be this brush. Again, you can see it's relatively knackered, and a fat brush. Essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it up as I go along. So anyway, let me clear the desk, let me get myself ready, and we'll get on with texturing, painting, weathering and dusting this thing down. Right, so we've got everything set now and we're going to do the texturing. So I've got my paint here, my stippling brush, and I'm going to start on the door. Also, you'll notice I've got my reference images here of the TARDIS from season 13, because this is the box we're working on, the season 13 version. So why don't we have a look at the reference material. So these two shots were taken during season 13. This one here to the right is from the last time the prop ever appeared on the show, so that's Seeds of Doom. And this one over here was taken during the making of, I think it was Disney time, where Tom Baker did some sort of links between cartoons. Anyway, in season 13, or just prior to the making of season 13, the BBC props guys or scenic guys overhauled the box a little bit. They added various little details and whatnot to it, including this lock piece here, and they clad the fronts. But they also gave it a little bit more texture and a new paint job, and that paint job was darker than it was previously and very slightly glossy, as you can see. Now, I'm only using these as a guide. I'm not going to copy these meticulously and religiously. I'm just using them to give me a sort of hint as to what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, as I said, I'm not going to try and replicate it absolutely perfectly. What I am going to do is use it as inspiration. So, the whole point of this is to take the paint and use it neat. And I'll take it onto my brush, and what I'm going to do, for all intents and purposes, is just stipple, because all I want to do is break this very flat and smooth surface down. So I'll go over it just like this, let that dry, work on the next part. I'll probably do the roof after that and then the main body of the box. And then once that's dried, I will go around and add a little bit more heavier body texture, because this stuff can hold its own form. What we're looking for really are peaks and troughs. So little high points and little low points to give us this sort of dappled look. So as I said, I will go over it once just to break the surface, and then once that's absolutely cured and dried, I'll go over it again with a slightly thicker paint and just add in extra lumpy areas in a few specific areas, like, you know, down here for example, or across there, and put some in amongst you know, round here. So that's what I'm going to do now. So what do I need? Let's crack open the paint. I'm just going to put out a small amount because I don't need too much. Take our little brush, load the brush, and let's make a start. So we don't need to go too heavy at the moment, just going around it. We just want to get some texture on there, so I can constantly work it back and forth. And it doesn't matter if the paint runs out, we're going to just go round and round and round this, so be a bit rough in here. But as you can see, there's a little bit of texture appearing there, so I can start pushing it in. Just want to go a bit lighter around here. I want to get it in there. Don't want to go on the lock too much. I can go over this lock because this lock was absolutely laden with paint, so it doesn't matter if I obliterate some of the detail. Down this side here I don't want too much texture, because obviously when this closes the door backs up against the inside of the corner post, so I don't want to fill that completely up. Just going to take that paint there off. There we go. Just with the finger. Reload the brush, back in again. Now the reason I've got this door on the tape is for two reasons. A, so I don't get paint underneath on the back side of it, but also so I can hold on to it. So I can hold it there and continue texturing. And I really do want to get up into all the crevices, into the panel lines here, and that is pretty much done. I'm just going over it, just working. I want to make sure that any brush strokes I inadvertently put on there are gone, but that looks about right, and it's almost dry as well. There we go. So that's pass one. What I want to do now is I want to go and do the roof and the main body of the box. So bear with me, I'm going to go and work on the box. Load the brush and let's just start. Just paying particular attention to in these quadrant beadings that run down there. I don't want to fill it with paint, so I'm going back constantly and stabbing it through just to blend it out a bit. And also just remember that when we're doing this kind of job, there are no mistakes, just happy little accidents, so let's carry on. Gonna beat the devil out of it. See, the further you go on with this sort of thing, you start running out of places to hold it, because you don't want to leave fingerprints or any other extraneous impressions in your texturing. Okay, it's getting hot in here, so the old coat and jumpers come off. while I'm waiting for this to dry and the main body to dry, my door here has already pretty much, in fact it has dried, so I think I'm going to give it a second coat of the old blue, and yeah, that's just a bit too much blue there, but let's make a start. So I'm going a little bit thicker with the paint in places, and that is just to add our lumpy texture. Don't want to go too much because we don't want to scale this too large. That's a problem I see on quite a few model builds. People tend to forget about the scale of their texture. So I'm just putting in roughly at the minute. Now I want to go over with a sponge and just lightly dab, just to take away the brush marks. I don't want to destroy that thick build-up of paint, apart from that, which is on the lock. And I'm just lightly dabbing, very lightly. Think of Bob Ross when you're doing this, and you can't go wrong. So, a little bit more, let's have a bit more paint. And that should do it. Right, so that's the texturing done with 2 layers or 2 rounds of neat acrylic paint, and all I did was just, as I mentioned earlier, I just stippled it on. Did a base coat first, and then went round it a second time once the first layer had dried, and just put it on it slightly thicker and just dabbed it around and just worked at it until it was pleasing to the eye. So at least I can see now that there are no smooth areas on anywhere on this model. And that's going to help me when I come to do the weathering later. I will base coat this in its blue and then use acrylic, black and brown, and maybe a yellow, and just pick out those low points and high points with what I termed many years ago a filth wash. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now we're on the home run, and all I've got to do now is base coat it. Okay, I've got my airbrush charged to 20 psi. To be honest, I'm not expecting great things from this because it is a cheap one and I've had nothing but trouble from it in the past. I mean, the compressor's not too bad, it's mainly this piece of junk, but it only cost me about £60 for all of it, and as I have repeatedly said, you get what you pay for. So let's get that pointed over there. Well, much to my better judgment, I do have the airbrush out, and already the signs aren't good, so I'm not expecting much. So I'm fairly convinced that after a few minutes I'm going to go and use my paintbrush. So, let's just start the inevitable. Not a damn thing. No, let's just go straight over to brush painting this thing. Piece of crap airbrush, might as well put it straight in the bin right now. It is a load of gack. Can't even be bothered with that. Well, good morning everyone, and welcome to the inaugural flight of my new airbrush. My other one, my temperamental one, really fouled up the other day, so a new one was bought, and we're working on one of the season 12 TARDISes, so it's going to be a slightly lighter colour. So this seemed to spray okay. Let's just try it out. Yeah, it seems to be working okay. Actually, this is much nicer than my old brush. That's much nicer, actually. Much nicer. Let me just brush this down. Some of that cack. Yeah. Well, that's going on really nicely. Obviously I've got to do a couple of more layers of this, but so far so good. Do the little top up. So overall impression so far is I'm really pleased with this. So anyway, I'm going to continue with this and we'll come back when it's finished. Now that we've got our base colour applied to the model, I want to tone this down very slightly, because what I would like to do is give the model a little bit of a mottled colour texture. So for that we're going to add a spot of white to it. Now let's just take these lids off. Should have done this earlier. And we're going to mix it into a new glass jar here. Now take some of my base tone and apply it into here. Probably go for 2 of these, because this has to do at least 2 models. Ah, screw it, let's do a bit more. There we go. So, won't need that anymore. Now I do have here a piece of cardboard with some of the base tone already on there, but I'm just going to take just a little bit, just add on a little bit more. And this is going to act as a guide, so once I've added white to our new mixture, I can apply it to this and see what the colour difference is. So, just get the excess off. Now, a couple of drops of white. I want to go very, very judiciously on this. So, 1, 2. Don't want to do too much. Let's just have a look at how that seems. Get the old mixing stick and just mix that in. So already it's gone a touch lighter, but by how much? And this is where this comes into play. I'm just going to roll it across. I may go a tad lighter than that. Yeah, let's just add a little bit more white. Just a drop or two. Mix that up again. Back to the card. Yeah, that's subtle. So I shall start adding some of that to the surface of my model. I've got a bit of a, not quite a dry mix, not quite wet either, sort of somewhere in the middle. I'm just going to dab a little bit around, just sort of randomly, and see how it looks. So you can do this a couple of times maybe. I'll probably do it one more time with a little bit of extra white in there. But we just need a bit of colour variation on the surface. Now you may be wondering why we need this colour variation. Well, a couple of reasons really. Nothing is ever truly one blanket colour. But also this represents some of the repair work that the BBC Scenic guys would have done just as the prop itself got bashed and knocked around a bit. They wouldn't have had time to repaint the entire thing, so they would have painted it, or they would have touched it up, so that's what this represents. Right, so I've added a little bit of white to my paint, and it's not a dry brush and it's not a wet brush. It's neat paint, and I've brushed some of it off, but there's still quite a quantity of it on there. Now all we want to do is start to put it on here randomly. So the problem that we have as humans is that we look for order in almost everything. So the best thing to do when trying to create random stuff is to actually think about something else. Now, what am I thinking about right now? I'm actually thinking about what I'm supposed to be saying to you to tell you about this process. So that's just basically it. It's try not to add in patterns to things, just distract yourself completely, and that generally helps. So as I said, the paint here isn't, well, it is neat, but it's not a wet mix, and it's not exactly a dry mix either. It's sort of a halfway house between the pair of them. And all I'm doing is just scrubbing it in there and letting the paint sort of run out. Just going to take some of the excess off with this stippling brush. And you can do that. So reload the brush. Again, don't need it too heavy. I'm not even taking all the paint off. I'm just loading the brush up with paint, going dab 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 dab, working it in, and then adding it on here. So just let the brush dance around and just try to remember where you've been. That's the other thing. Luckily you can see it. So I don't want to go overboard. I don't want to cover up all the other colours that I've got on here. And this may look, as you're doing it, a bit overbearing and a bit overpowering, but actually once you put on the filth wash it'll be absolutely fine. Again, I'm just picking some of the excess off with this brush here, the dry brush. You don't have to do that, it's just I happen to put a bit too much on there. So Again, I'm thinking about what I'm saying to you, so I'm just doing this almost on autopilot. I should be using a sponge really for this, but I can't be bothered. So, just dance around. I don't think I had enough on my brush there, let's just get a bit more. And you could go round, and I probably will go round, with a second, or in this case a third layer, with more white in it, but that will be a dry brush. That really will be a dry brush. Now, is that everything on there? Just rock it back and forth. You can see the new paint over the old paint, because obviously it's going to be wetter, so it's going to have a bit of a sheen to it. So that looks largely consistent. Just noticed a bit down there. I could do with a bit more. Again, too much. If you put too much paint on, just wipe it off with whatever you got handy. I don't actually have any rags with me at the minute, so should have been more prepared than this. Also, try not to go back on yourself too much. Because you don't want to overwork it. Right, for this stage I'm adding on the final highlights. I've already started, and it's the base colour with a bit of white again, and a bit of white again, and now a final bit of white, and that's going to be our final highlights. Now I don't want to go too heavy, and this really is a dry brush. So let's take it over to here, and it is going to look a bit patchy. You'll probably be able to see this. Actually, I can probably go a little bit lighter. It's probably going to look a bit patchy, but again, once you put all the filth wash onto this, all this will blend in and it'll look a lot nicer. So let's just crack on with it. Just move those out of the way. Ah, look at that. Sirens as usual. Now this really is just some hair and some air, and I will go over it occasionally with my finger just to take it out a bit. Just a bit too much there. Just want to catch the edges. Now this stage is always the very wary stage. It's because it will look very, very smeary. But you've just got to go with it, stick with it. It will look awful, but as I said, you pop the colour slightly at this point and then dull it back a bit later. So you can sort of think of it in terms of safety in numbers. So don't do lots of don't do little bits and leave it, do lots of little bits. If you see anything that looks too obviously worked and streaky, you can sort of blend that back out again. But again, try not to overdo it. In terms of percentages of coverage, we're probably looking at about, I don't know, 20 to 30%. Right, so for now I think we're going to leave it. You can come back and join me when I put the filth wash on, but I'm going to continue doing this highlight stage. Right, so the first phase of weathering has been done, so the base blue has gone on and then various lighter shades of blue have been applied. But you'll also notice I've added in some of these white highlights. Now it may look like I've gone overboard, but this is to replicate all the chips from the Artex that appeared. And when I come to do the actual filth wash, a lot of this is going to be toned down anyway, so it's looking fairly successful. I'm reasonably happy with it. So all I have to do now really is just start mixing up some blacks and browns and absolutely bathing it in it. So that's what we'll do next. Right, here's the scary bit. This is where we're going to start adding lots and lots of filth. And for that I'll be using acrylic paint. It's going to be black and a brown. I think in this case it's a raw umber, but again it doesn't really matter because all we're using the brown for is to knock the black back from being a pure black. I may come in at a later date with raw sienna over here. Again, that really doesn't matter, I just want a slightly lighter brown. Now the objective of this is to make the paint very, very, very watery at an almost ink-like, or even a sub-ink-like state. It's going to be one brush, sponge and some rags. Actually, I want to get some rags. Screw it, we'll just carry on. Right, bit of black, some brown. Actually, I'll put brown over here. There you go. And I want plenty of water for this. Water is the key, really. And all we're doing is adding this inky mixture to it is going to unify all the various colours down. I know you probably can't see all the different colours, but it will sort of dull this white down a bit. It'll just unify and make the whole thing look like a homogeneous whole. So as always, just like last time, lots of water. I mean lots of water. And I'm just going to crack on with it. Some brown, more brown, a bit more brown. It is very scary doing this. Actually, I'm going to bring that into here, just so the black doesn't contaminate it even further. Just take a bit more. Some more water. A bit more black. A bit of brown. And we're just going to layer this up. That's all we're doing. Layering it up. Here's the scary bit. 1, 2, 3, go! Add in some more water into it. Take some of that off. I should have got some... I really should get a rag. Doing this is incredibly scary if you're not used to it, but sometimes it's just not worth worrying about. After all, it is just paint. And we can go around this a few times, back and forth, back and forth. Concentrate at the bottom, where it's going to be darker. Add a bit of water into that, just bring it round. Add a bit more black into it, a bit more water. Oh, huge drop there. Best thing to do is, at this sort of stage, is not to panic. Let's just get it all in there. And as I say before, smush it around. Dab it off. Right, Yeah, just don't be scared of it. Diluting it down with water just helps to stop any tide marks. That's the last thing you want, is tide marks. So we can just take those out. So if you think your colour is a bit too strong in places, just add some water to it and dab it off. That's what I'm going to be doing right now. Dab, 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 dab. Again, saying dab helps. And we're on to the doors now. Could be a bit gentle around here. Try and move quickly. I don't have to worry about that bit because the pull to open sign is going to go in there. So let's just add in a bit up here. I want lots in there because that's my little door crack. So actually I must remember to go around and do the windows on the other side. Add a bit more water just to help blend it. Got there. Dab, 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 dab. Again, I don't want to put too much on, so some water. And this just helps unify everything together. A bit more water. Put it around there. Immediately take that off. Just dabbing motions. So I'm going to let this dry for now, and then I'm going to come back to it and do the second round. I only need a few minutes, but leave it for now, come back in a moment. So the filth wash has now thoroughly dried, and having looked at it, I actually think that I've pretty much done with this. What I've done is I've quickly gone off and had a look at some of the reference images that I have of the prop from this season, and that is pretty much how it looks on cameras. So I think instead of giving it a second do, I am going to leave it as that. Now I do have one other little trick up my sleeve, and that is this. It's weathering powder. So what I want to do is just concentrate on areas down here on the base, just to replicate the sort of, well, the final few stories where it was really filthy. So I think that might look quite nice, so let's check that out. This weathering powder is just that, it's just powder, so I can just plaster it on, and if I don't like it or it goes wrong, I can just wipe it off with a damp towel. So that gives me a bit of leeway. So anyway, I'm going to start. Where shall I start? Let's start over here. So just want to, just a little bit down here. Don't want too much. So I'm just going to concentrate it just down here. You know, and maybe a little bit up here. Like I said, if I don't like it, I can always take it off. Like that, for example. looking. Yep. See how easy that was, just to take that off. Probably going to be more filth just in and around the doorway. That's where the most footfall traffic is. No, I could even add in some darker shades as well into this. Maybe a little bit of black, or I could go the opposite way and add in some white or even some sort of sandy colour and mix it all together. But what I don't want to do is overdo it. Right, so I've taken it as far as I can go, and I really did just stick with the darker powder. I didn't bother with the lighter stuff, and I think that looks alright. Suitably dirty. Could do with a little bit of, hang on, a little bit of a touch up there, but that is pretty much where I want it. A fairly used looking prop. So, next thing I have to do is take the old lacquer and seal it. So I'm at the point now where I'm just about to spray and I have to be absolutely certain that I'm committed to this look, and yep, I think I am actually. Always best to check, because once I put this on it's sealed. I don't want to spray really close. I want to be spraying just about a foot. So you probably can't see the actual spray can, it will more than likely be off camera, but it's just a light dusting. And swoop, 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 swoop. Very light bursts, I don't want to go too heavy. Okay. I can leave that, but that is pretty much done in terms of the weathering. Well, we've come to the end of the video, so that just about wraps up my little technique on how I texture and weather my models. And I think it's, despite its subtlety, it's rather nice. So as you can see, there's the darker version and then the lighter version, and all we did was use simple household stuff, acrylic paints, some Tamiya paints and some weathering powders, and we just sloshed stuff around and produced this. Now, just to show you by comparison, this is an unweathered one, so it doesn't have the filth wash. You can see the difference is fairly marked. But you could have stopped there if you want, that just has its various different colours put on it, but this one has various shades of blue, our weathering filth, and then weathering powder around the bottom. So anyway, I'm glad that you could join me today, and hopefully you can take something away from this to help in your own build projects, and most importantly, thanks for watching.